Okay. The time is always right to do what is right. Dr. Martin Luther King said a long time ago. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Morgan State University. Also, welcome to Research and Scholarship Webinar Series. The series is organized by the School of Education and Urban Studies in collaboration with the Division of International Affairs and the STAR Scholars. And there are at least 2 sessions scheduled every month for both faculty and students. So in a few minutes, you will hear from our panelists, guests about their research publication and their academic journals, type of manuscript they consider in their journals, and upcoming collaborative opportunities. My name is Krishna Bista, Professor of Higher Education in the Department of Advanced Studies, Leadership Policy, at Morgan State University. I'm also the founding editor of the Journal of International Student. You will hear about the journal in a few minutes. We have roughly 60 minutes ahead of us. I invite all of you to reflect on these important questions of what tips and suggestions do you offer for emerging scholars, particularly from the Global South, who want to publish their articles or the books, maybe in your journals, or maybe they want to collaborate with you. Please continue using the chat room for your notes or suggestions. We are here to support each other in our research and publication journey. So we begin the program with the brief remarks from Dr. Sekayi. She is an associate professor and she coordinates educational leadership doctoral program at Morgan State University. She has published numerous articles, books, and the reviews and commentaries on a wide range of educational topics. The floor is yours, Dr. Sekayi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bista. Thank you for having me. Good evening or good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I was asked today to talk just very briefly a little bit about the program that I coordinate and then a little bit about my research. So very briefly, the EDD program at Urban Educational Leadership was the first doctoral program on Morgan State's campus. It started in 1979, and we're still growing and thriving today. At this point, we enroll about 75 to 80 students each semester at any given time. We admit about 10 or 12 students once a year in the fall. That deadline actually is today, so I've been reading through applications all day today. I am happy to say that we have done some really interesting revisions to our program to refocus and reinvigorate our focus on social justice and educational leadership. So if you know anyone who is interested in studying at Morgan State, I'll put my email in the chat. Also, in the spirit of growth, we are hiring faculty for our program. So if anyone is interested in applying for faculty positions, I will also put a link to the position in the chat. I'll put several things in there when we're done. So that's the brief story of urban educational leadership. So just really briefly, I'm pretty embedded in my own program, but just so you know, we have for departments and programs. Our program is embedded in the Advanced Studies Leadership and Policy Department, where we have 5 doctoral programs: Urban Educational Leadership, Community College, Higher Education, and Math and Science Education. We have another department that's Teacher Ed and Professional Development, where our undergraduate programs live. And we have Family and Consumer Sciences, also where undergraduate programs are. And then we have a Center for Excellence in Math and Science, and I'll just leave that there. So in terms of recent publications, Dr. Bista has posted my most recent publication from Teachers College Record, which talks about the role of intellectual humility in dissertation completion. So that's not the article I want to talk about, but I do want to talk about another article that I published with Teachers College Record, just because we're talking about process here. So I really like Teachers College Record, and over my career, I think this is like the 3rd item that I've published with them, because I find them to be very welcoming, and they provide feedback, and they're timely, and they also have various structures for publications. And so that's the focus of my very brief comment today, is that I find that to be a good outlet, because not every article will be empirically based. on, research that you've been mulling over for years and years. Like not every article is that. And Teachers College Record leaves openings for commentaries, book reviews, research notes, which are really interesting, so you can get things out quickly, and then traditional articles. They also have some pretty good professional development online in terms of videos and just guidance for new scholars that I, as a scholar who's been around for a while, found helpful as well. And so the article that I wanted to highlight today is one that I wrote about procedural justice and the market approach to faculty salaries. And so that is sort of tangentially related to my interest in Black future faculty, just in terms of talking about the field and considerations they should have as they consider whether to stay in the K-12 setting or move to the higher ed setting. And the reason I'm raising this issue is because even as an associate professor, I'm still intellectually curious and I still like to learn. So I pursued a graduate certificate in ed policy. And in taking this course, I wrote this article or a paper for the course on procedural justice and faculty salary setting. And so I really liked the way it turned out. I got good feedback from the professor, so I decided I wanted to share it through publication. And so, just doing the research, I think, is a really important thing because, like I said, there are lots of different ways and items we can publish. Not everything is based on empirical data. So this is a theoretical article and I found a home for it at TCR. I don't work for TCR. I have no connection to TCR. I'm just sharing that I had a good experience there. But there are other places as well that are that way. So just in terms of doing your research on the place to publish is really important. I would also say, as a person who's been around for some time, that for me, I'm more focused on getting the work out. Some of the work that I've had read most of mine, which I really, honestly, there's so much out there that, you don't get a lot of attention on any one given article because everybody's reading everything. But I've gotten more attention sometimes from those smaller, simpler articles than I have from articles that I've put years into collecting data. So I think you have to really think about, and I think we're all colleagues here, really think about what the purpose of your publication is. I know many of us publish because we need to, we love to, but we have pressure from work to publish. But I also want to think about, as I sort of advance and I'm considering retirement at this point, I want to think about the value of my work and where it shows and who's going to read it. So some of the things I've gotten feedback on aren't the sort of the most complex articles. So think about where you publish. It's not always going to be the top journal, but it might be a journal that lots of people read. Sometimes you need the top journal for your work in order to sort of have a more prestigious journal on your CV, but you want people to read your work in the end. For me, that's the goal, for somebody to read it, get something from it, and enjoy it. So I'll leave it there, but thank you very much for listening, and I'm posting several items in the chat now.
Thank you, Dr. Sekayi. Appreciated sharing your insight. Now it's time for a panel discussion on publication opportunities. Before we go into discussion, each invited editor will take a few minutes to introduce their journal, publication policies, other tips or notes. First, I invite Professor Dr. Cara Finnigan from University of Rochester, New York. Dr. Finnigan is a distinguished professor and also editor-in-chief of AERA Open, one of the big AERA Open journal. So now floor is yours, Dr. Finnigan.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to put in the chat the link to our journal in case you want to be looking at it while I'm talking. I'm really excited to be here. This is amazing. When I got the invitation, I couldn't believe all the time zones that were included. So I know there are people from all over the world. And AERA Open is an opportunity for all of you. It does accept both US focused and international studies. I became editor-in-chief on January 1st of this year. So I have a new team that we've been putting together. And I would say I was actually very excited about the opportunity to be the editor-in-chief for a few reasons. One is that it is our AERA, the American Educational Research Association. It's our only open access journal. And I've been working a lot in my own activities at my faculty job at the University of Rochester and sort of thinking more about how we break down the barriers and the gatekeeping around some of the knowledge production that happens. And so to have an open access journal means that we can reach more groups, whether it's policymakers or practitioners or even people in other countries. And so I think that's a really important way to generate knowledge and also make sure that people have access to it. Another reason that I wanted to be involved in this journal is because I wanted to find ways to build the field as far as diversifying the methods and the perspectives that are published, that are represented basically in AERA Open. And so a couple of things that I thought I'd mention, this is a journal that does take both empirical and theoretical studies, although I would say it's primarily, we get a lot more empirical studies. If you did submit something that's more theoretical or conceptual, I think that it would be important to be very clear about the conceptual or methodological work that you're doing. So for example, if it's a philosophy study, then what kind of rigorous methods that you would use as a philosopher, even if they're not collecting the same kind of data that we might see in other empirical studies. A couple of other things that I just wanted to mention is that I thought it might be useful to know, I don't like the term desk reject, but that is what happens when sometimes we see an initial stage of the process that we don't think it's quite ready to go out for external review. And if that does happen, then please know that it's not anything about the capability that you bring to that work, but it's that we do have limited access to reviewers. And so we do try to move forward things that we can see that they're more ready to go through that next process. And one of the major reasons that we desk reject is when we see that it's just not quite put together. There might not be strong enough rationale that's been described in terms of why this study is done or why it's important to the field. It might not be as theoretically grounded in terms of really delving into the literature that discusses, perspectives that you're bringing to this topic. It might not have sufficient details about the methodology. And that can be one where we just can't tell yet really what the area that you've been working in, how the data was collected. There sort of needs to be some transparency around that in terms of the details. And finally, another area that we have is if it's not a thread that goes through so that when the findings are discussed, they're discussed in light of that conceptual framework. So I thought those might be things just to know about the kinds of things we're seeing right away that are coming in that we're not yet ready to move forward to external review. So I think I'll stop there and just let the other people have some of their conversation around their journals, because I know we're going to have some questions later.
Thank you. Appreciate it. That's great information. By the way, all AERA journal are the top journal in our field, and this is the only open access journal. You can visit actually website and look into the aims and scope, and then also publication fees. There are different fees for the member and non-members. Now, let's hear from Dr. Rosalind Raby from California State University. She is also editor-in-chief of the Journal of Comparative and International Higher Education, the flagship journal of higher education within CIES. And she's also pioneer of international education on international student counterpart of community colleges. Dr. Raby, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me today and to talk about my new favorite topic, the Journal of Comparative and International Higher Education. And thank you, Krishna, for putting up the link. JCIHE is an open access, independent, peer review international journal, and we publish original contributions to the field of comparative and international higher education. So all the publications need to match our mission on comparative and international higher education. So if you submit something on elementary education, we'll say thank you very much. This is really interesting, but this doesn't fit the theme of the journal. So we really focus on higher education. Our journal serves as a place to share new thinking on analysis, theory, policy, and practice. as it relates to the topic of higher education. Our objectives are to unite researchers undertaking comparative projects. We're a forum for reflective and critical thinking. We're concerned with showcasing new and diverse international research that uses rigorous methodology, focuses on theory, policy, practice, critical analysis, and development analysis that influences higher education. We have as our core principles comparative research, engagement with theory, and diverse voices in terms of authorship. There are a variety of publications that we accept. We have empirical articles, scholarly essays and reviews, and we do have one issue every year on emerging scholar research summaries. And these are usually submitted by doctoral students, summarizing a current research, not necessarily their dissertations, because these are at maximum 1,200 words. But it provides an opportunity for doctoral students who haven't yet gone through the peer review process and to experience what it means to summarize your ideas very succinctly. The empirical articles are 5,500 to 7,500 words. And I can share information. Oh, there it is. I just realized that that information is up there. One of the things that we're most proud of, and then I'll stop and allow others to share, is the diversity of our authorship. We have a, oh yeah, I mean, everybody wants to put the number of the data, so we could just go on. I mean, that's, you guys could have that in the slide, that we actually something here that I'm very excited to is that days to first decision are usually 20 days. But I am working on upping the acceptance rate, not the acceptance rate, but the communication on our journals. We have 2 slides because our authorship is so diverse. Our top 8 countries are Australia, Canada, China, Japan, Turkey, United Kingdom, and United States. And this is a multi-year comparison to show the growth in some of these areas. Can you do the next slide? But this slide is very exciting. As you can see, we have numerous other countries that are beginning to publish anywhere from 1 article to 3 in the journal. What this means is that we are open to authors from all around the world. We are inclusive. We are allowing of submissions that might be introduced in a unique way. However, we insist on following certain formats, such as making sure your research objectives are clear, making sure that you have clear methodology, etc. We encourage new perspectives and new voices. And when I was thinking that Krishna put down what can be beneficial, 2 things: follow the directions. If you don't follow the directions and use the template, we are going to do Desproject because we get so many submissions that I can't spend the time reformatting everybody's work. So follow the directions, they're very clear. And that goes for any journal that you're involved in. The second is be familiar with that journal. Read the articles in that journal. I come across as a reviewer of many journals, as well as reading this own, that people say, oh, there's a dearth in the literature. No, there's really not a dearth in the literature. It's usually that you're not familiar with what other people are publishing. And especially if you want to get published in a journal, be very, very familiar. Do a whole bunch of searches of the past articles so that you are aware that other people most likely are talking about the same ideas just in a different context. So at that, I will pass on to my next colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very important information there. And we'll have more questions in the chat. Please continue posting your questions and we'll take them in a minute. Next, I'd like to invite my colleague here for another 2 minutes remarks or introduce the journal. So let's move to Professor Dr. Gonli from Morgan State University. He's the founding editor of Journal of Underrepresented and Minority Progress, JUMP. Dr. Gonli?
Dr. Bista, I didn't see him in.
Oh, maybe he got the, yes, he had multiple meetings, might be confused, or maybe in another meeting, but I can talk a little bit. This is also open access journal, part of our open journals in education platform. They publish twice a year, and you can see their timeline, deadline, and some of the, the general aims and scopes on my screen. So with that, there are also a list of the journals within that open access journal OJED platform. These journals are based at research public university in the US. Some of them are emerging journals, some of them are well established. So you may consider some of these open access platform or AERA Open, any journals that you feel, that your manuscript align with the aims and scope. Is our editor mentioned earlier, please read the aims and scope of the journals rather than just uploading your manuscript. So with that, we want to go with the bigger question of the day here. Let's hear from our editors regarding the tips or suggestions that they offer for our emerging scholars who want to publish in their prestigious journal. Any tips, suggestion? Maybe we can go in the same order from Dr. Finnigan, then Dr. Raby, and Dr. Gonli if he comes later.
Sure. I was also going to mention that it's very helpful to read some of the, the last few that have been published, as well as if you do some searches for your particular area of study in the journal that you're interested in. But I also want to highlight something else that was mentioned, which don't feel like there's only one place for your work. So sometimes you might find, especially if you're a junior scholar or newer to the publishing process, you might find that there are some journals that are not, maybe they're not top tier in some of the ways that we think about them in terms of the metrics used, but they're still really valuable places to have your work. And going through the process alone can be helpful. And sometimes also one other thing that I guess I just want to emphasize, because I don't think that it's discussed enough, that many people have had a rejection, including myself, have had rejections from some journals and gotten the reviews, and it's helped me think about how I want to proceed with the work and then go to a different place with it. And so it's all a developmental learning process as you interact with the reviewers of your work. So I see it as a really important role, both that we an editorial group play in helping to shape the field, but the reviewers also play a really critical role. And so as you're working on finding your affiliation groups in terms of journals that are of interest to you, finding ways to be reviewers, signing up to be a reviewer in their database, for example, can be really useful, because then you also there's this sort of give and take that happens as you give feedback to other people in your area of expertise, and then as you get feedback back from them. So again, this is part of a learning process for all of us as we're getting our work closer to moving to the publication stage.
Dr. Raby?
So I agree 100% with everything Dr. Finnigan said. And I will emphasize the importance of critical feedback. don't be afraid of it. You're going to learn, you're going to grow, you're going to rethink, and it will take your manuscript to a different direction. But a couple of very specific things I will mention. Make sure your research questions or the focus or the topic is clearly indicated in the introduction. I'm seeing a lot of submissions where I have to search for what is the topic and what is the thesis of the paper. And if I have to search for it, I've already lost interest. Make sure your literature review is current. Current means about 2016, 2017. Don't give me data from 2008 and say it speaks for today. You know, that's getting into 15 plus years old. The currency makes you then get more familiar with what's new in publications. Make sure your methods are detailed. The second area that I see where rejection usually occurs is that the methods are not detailed. And think about the methods as being your avenue for trust. Why would somebody trust what you're saying? Well, if you could detail your methods to show that how you got your information is so valid and critically thought out, then we could add to the trust of the paper. And I also find that rejection occurs a lot where the discussion is the discussion and the conclusion already put together. Separate them out. I think that really helps the reader in understanding your ideas. And at the end of the day, you want to clearly communicate your ideas so that the reader comes away with an aha moment, like, wow, I really enjoyed reading this and it means something to me.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Bista, we do have questions.
Yeah, go ahead and read
Okay.
it, please.
Thank you. The first question is, how much experience and or publishing should a person have to volunteer as a reviewer?
So I'm going to say none. I think that a reviewer can be somebody with a vast amount of experience as well as a new graduate student. You're reading articles in your classes, you're digesting, you're thinking, wow, this is a really good article versus a less good article. You are in a state where you have now the qualities that you can start reviewing. And Dr. Finnigan already mentioned that the more that you can review, the more you're going to fine tune your own skills on writing. And you can see what works in other art submissions and what really is in need of extra attention. And then you could be able to translate that into your own writing.
Yes, I feel like I want to say the exact same thing that you're saying, and then you say it, so this is perfect. I think that there's so much expertise that you probably already bring that you could give feedback on something that's separate from publication. I mentioned that in the chat. But sometimes if you're a little bit unsure, if you are affiliated with an association that has a conference, for example, AERA, you might also think about conference proposal reviews, which is a similar kind of thing where you're giving feedback on a study, but it's not yet to the publication kind of stage of it. And I think that the reason also, you know, the reason that we're talking about doing that is it gets you in the body of work usually that you're also interested in. So not just thinking about how you understand the, you know, the format, the structure, but also you're deepening your knowledge of what people are doing in that area. It might not be exactly your field, but a lot of times you'll be reviewing on things that are fairly close. And so again, it's helping your thinking in your own work as you're also giving feedback to someone else.
Thank you. We have two more questions. Can the editor speak to submitting your article to multiple journals? So I know that there was some advice on submitting to multiple journals. So could you talk about that a little bit?
I'll just clarify if that was from what I said, that usually you're only allowed to submit to one journal at a time. And so in my experience, you submit it to a journal and it's in their review process. And then once it's out of their review process, if, for example, it either gets desk rejected or it might go through the process and go to external review, and then you might get feedback, but you might be rejected. In either of those cases, it's back in your control and you can go somewhere else. But usually you would have to withdraw it from a journal if you actually want to go, say you find a journal that you think would be a better fit. And so you want to think about that a lot ahead of time, so that the first place that you're submitting is a place that you would want to kind of keep it through that process. That's my experience anyway, is that typically you would always have it just in one place at a time.
Thank you.
I
Go ahead,
agree.
Dr. Raby, I apologize.
No, I agree. And I think this is really important because as you can see, as editors of journals, we're kind of friends. And if something is a little bit suspect, we'll reach out to each other. And that then doesn't fare well for you in your publishing in the multiple journals. So do one submission at a time.
Thank you. We have several questions. The next one is, if your piece has been rejected, what should be done before submitting to a different journal?
I find that I'll just jump in, sorry, that if you think about it as you've gotten, if it's been desk rejected, then I would look back. If you don't have very specific feedback, which you might not, because often that's it's an internal review that doesn't have the same kind of depth of engagement. We've looked through it very closely, we've discussed it, but we're not kind of engaging in the same way to give you the feedback to move forward towards publication. And so in that case, I would go back to thinking about, maybe you need to revisit some of the things that we've just said about why that happens, but also look again at the submissions requirements, the directions that, look very closely to see where the gaps might have been, and then looking at some of the sort of models that have been published. If you've gotten feedback, so you've gotten through the process to external review and you've gotten some feedback from reviewers, but it's not moving forward, I would see that as a golden opportunity to sit with that and think about what they've spent time engaging with your work and giving you feedback. So again, thinking about this as a learning process. And then it is up to you a little bit to see how you want to address those kinds of things. If you are moving forward with the same journal, so you've gotten the reviews and we've said that you can actually send us a revision, then you are more likely to want to say, I'm going to really try to think very hard about how I incorporate those things that they've shared with me that they think need to happen, because you're still in our process. If you're going somewhere else, you have a little bit more control over that, I guess, in a way, but I would still take it very seriously, because often what has been shared with you can significantly improve the work that you submit to the next place. But sometimes you might find that it's something that is taking you in a different direction. And so if you're going to submit it to the next place, you're not under any rules to have to work within what they're suggesting to you. But you might find that at least going through each thing that they've shared with you about something that, whether it's conceptual or methodological or something very basic around, following certain kinds of rules or expanding upon certain areas, I would really take the time to grapple with that before you move forward somewhere else.
Thank you so much. Just to quickly, we have a lot of questions, and we still have some more. So what I'm going to do is we're going to address one more question, but I will ask everyone to continue to put questions in the chat I am capturing them and will share them with Dr. Bista and the panel participants, and we will try to get answers that way in the notes to everyone. So our next question for this one is about the blind review. Is it always fair?
So I'm going to say that it is as fair as people are honest. So the blind peer review process that JCIH does is that we send it out to 2 to 4 individuals who have put down in their profiles that they have common interests, and their names are not shared with the author at all. The author's name is not shared with the reviewers. So unless they read the article and guess who it is on that level fair. Now, I have had situations where someone will write to me and say, I think I know who this is. I want to recuse myself. And I say, thank you very much for being honest. And in that way, there's a little bit of a check and balance. By sending it out to 4 people, I'm getting multiple viewpoints. And then that way I'm not just relying on one set of reviews to make a decision. So I think in that respect, it is fair. Whether or not we should go to open peer review, our journal has discussed this at length and decided we want to still keep it blinded and not do the publishing of the review process.
Thank you, Dr. Raby. Dr. Bista, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. I also received a few questions in a private direct message here. In the room, yes, we have many colleagues representing different countries from Nepal, India, particularly in South Asia and other part of the Australia. The one particular question, I want to go the next segment, but this is a question from one of our colleagues suggesting, I'm not familiar with the AERA, but I like the AERA Open. It's coming from SAGE publication. The challenge at my university is the university doesn't offer incentives to pay the publishing fees for the journal. 700 is quite expensive. Is there a lower fees for developing countries or global South? And we have also pressure to get published in our Scopus listed journal. Are there fees for other journals? I know it's a long question.
I think the main part I would say is that if AERA Open is, as you're looking into different journal opportunities or outlets, and AERA Open is a place that you think is appropriate for your work, that you can submit it and put a note about the publication fee, and we'll take that into consideration if it does move forward. So, we sometimes are able to adjust the fees. It's not, I'm still trying to figure out how to address these things on a more systemic and global way. But I would say that would be something that letting us know in that process can help us to understand when that's an issue. And the only other thing that is at least a little bit of good news is that typically open access journals can charge between like $3,000 and $10,000. So we've tried to keep it really low to the degree we can in terms of that amount. But if you're also an AERA member, then you get to have the opportunities of different kinds of resources and connections in other ways that also can reduce the cost of the publication. So thinking about in terms of the opportunities to be connected, it might allow you to have access to the journal with less cost in terms of publication.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Going back to the earlier discussion, I know in the room we have early career professor and then doctoral students. Yes, you have taken several research courses and familiar, in the some aspect of the research. We welcome you to be on our editorial board. If you are interested, please reach out to our editors. Definitely, there are room for all emerging scholars. And also I have a similar experience with the rejection. It's learning with the rejection is really important. Each time in each rejection, it comes with a golden nugget. As long as you address those challenges, you are for sure to make your, a manuscript stronger, better, and you can always go for the next journal or the same journal. But it is a positive experience for me working on multiple journals and several book projects over the years. So thank you. Now we move to the next segment. I have four wonderful colleagues who are going to talk maybe 2 minutes each, talking about their recent publication and sharing their publication journey in open access and non-open access platform. So we start with Molly, Harry from University of Virginia, and Molly, over to you to talk briefly on your chapter. All right, it looks like she's not in the room. We can go to the next scholar. It's a wonderful book chapter. I had a pleasure to work with Greg for editing this particular volume. So Dr. Fraser, over to you to share your experience or summary of the chapter.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bista, for the invitation. I appreciate being here and meeting all of you scholars and editors. I was fortunate to have a book chapter published in this Routledge Studies in Global Student Mobility. As I met Dr. Bista and his colleague, Dr. Malveaux, who are editors of this particular series, and my study was focused on Latinx ESL students, their successful English language transition at community colleges, particularly urban community colleges. And this study was a qualitative study with a phenomenological approach. I collected data from 10 students who I had the pleasure of interviewing across 3 colleges. However, the chapter only mentions 5 students. What I'd like to say is that I thoroughly enjoyed this process of the stages of publishing for this book chapter. It was a lengthy process, and this was my first time having something published in terms of academic writing. What I would say is that there is a great deal, I would say, of editing that goes into it, of really polishing and making sure that from your introduction to your literature review to your theoretical approach, everything has to be very, clarified and polished. And I feel like this particular project gave me a great learning experience for understanding the process moving forward of submitting a proposed book chapter and seeing it through to publication. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Actually, yes, it was a long process. It took almost 2 years in the process of making this book. And many of our colleagues went to several rounds of edits. And working with Kelber and Francis was a little tough for us because they did have external copy editors as well, and we had to follow their protocols. So with that note, I'd like to invite my another emerging scholar, Kelber from George Washington. This is an open access book, and he might have different experience compared to the Kelber and Francis. Kelber?
Thank you, Dr. Bista. Yes, so I'm Kelber Tozini. I stay at George Washington University, and I'm originally from Brazil. So my research interests are around higher education in Brazil, but mostly I actually focus on the international student experience here in the US. but I decided to focus on the Brazilian context for this project because we don't tend to talk much about the global South, especially Latin America, when it comes to higher education. And there's usually a very deficit-based view of education in the global South. So this chapter actually has a more optimistic approach on how federal institutions in Southern Brazil responded to COVID-19. It was a context where all the classes were canceled for 3 to 4 months right after the pandemic started spreading in Brazil, but universities never stopped working. So students were still engaged in other types of activities. And even though classes weren't happening, learning was still happening. So I think that that was something important that we wanted to highlight with this. And this happened mostly through extension activities, which is more like outreach here in the US, in which universities basically, one of the missions of public universities is to devote significant time to their community. So universities basically created a lot of actions to teach the local communities on COVID-19 and strategies to cope with the effects of the pandemic. So, and how students at these institutions also got involved with this by giving presentations, engaging in hospitals, etc. So, as someone from the global South, I always try to bring a different approach that doesn't necessarily focus on the negatives, because we already are very critical of our system there. And we tend to just forget that we actually have a lot of positives in a context where public education is free to begin with, especially at the college level. So this is actually one of the 2 chapters that came out of this project. And yeah, if you have any questions, you can ask me. I try to basically also spread knowledge using open access journals and books, because especially people in the global South don't necessarily have access to these, to paid publications as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelber, appreciated. In fact, this book also went for at least 2 years in the peer review process, editing, and also going through the external, typesetter and editors. So the journey was not so much different from the other book with Routledge. So now we have one more guest for tonight from Texas Southern University, Professor Andrea Selden. So she will share her brief experience about her signature program, which we published with Paul Greb McMillan in collaboration with the Star Scholars. Over to you, Dr. Selden.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the guest, other guests. I appreciate the comments that you've made, and to the organizers. Thank you for this opportunity. My chapter talks about the study abroad experience at Texas Southern University. It actually started before I arrived at the university. It's over 20 years old, and I was a little disappointed that it hadn't gotten any more publicity, that the students on campus were not familiar with it. So I worked with 3 other colleagues, and we've gotten the material together to talk about how it was conceived and how it was developed. And I want to thank the editors in sharing their experience and giving those tips. I have had things accepted without any revisions. I've had things accepted with minor or major revisions, and then it was not a good fit for some of the articles that I have submitted have not been a good fit. This actually started as a journal article, and I did not get it accepted, and the editors offered some very good comments, and we decided we would just try another venue. And I was very pleased when it was picked up as a book chapter. But I want to address, I don't want you to get discouraged when you hear the word rejection. I want to echo what I've heard the others say. It is a learning experience. And you may say, when you get the letter, What I did respond, I did answer those questions. I did put that information in there. Well, it wasn't really clear enough, apparently. And the 2 to 4 editors may not have all the same opinion either. It may be a complimentary from one, and it may be that you didn't fulfill all the expectations of another. So you have to sort of balance that too. What is it that your reader is trying to say? What is it that the reviewer is trying to get you to focus on? So those are good tips. Now, the number of individuals that you work with, I think, are very critical too. I have one person with whom I've written several articles over many years. And then I've been in a group of individuals all writing one article, and there must have been about 20 of us. So you see, it's a wide range of experiences, and you can choose just to limit the number of your colleagues. You may want to write the article by yourself. But if you choose a number, then you have to recognize that everyone's going to be contributing something different. And you're going to have someone who takes the lead to sort of coordinate the contributions of everyone. So I want to leave it there, and I would be available to answer any other questions. I can leave my name in the chat. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, this book took almost 4 years in preparation. And still, we do not have a hard copies. They are supposed to come probably in a month or so. I did 2 rounds of conference on the very topics. We rejected many articles. They went through the same standard review process, blind review, and then a couple of rounds of, edits. So thank you very much. So what I'm suggesting here, the experience publishing a book chapters are not much different from publishing journal articles. So we go to one more round, giving a full circle on reflecting the tips and suggestion of publishing articles or book chapters. So we can pick up our remaining questions. We do have a few questions, we were not able to capture earlier, or any final thoughts that you would like to give back. So I'd like to go back to Dr. Finnigan and Dr. Raby and any of our, chapter authors to chime in for final notes.
Final thoughts. So I would say, I think, so obviously I'm not dealing with books directly, so that would be a different conversation for others, but in terms of publishing the articles, I think the main thing is to continue to work on it. As you've heard, that we are looking for something that's very polished, not a technical report. It's really looking at sort of both the structure and the depth of articles that are already published in our journal and in other journals can help you to see what we're expecting. Of course, that's done. So we do have a process that works you to get there. So it's not that it has to be finished, but aim for that, and you'll be further along in the process, and you can even reduce some of that back and forth time that we've been hearing about. So that would be my suggestion. Work hard now to get a lot of the things out of the way, and maybe even have somebody who can give you really good feedback in terms of really getting it to the point of publication.
And I'm going to say, don't be afraid, just jump in. What's the worst that could happen? You'll get rejected. But out of rejection comes new ideas and a new refined manuscript that then you could send somewhere else. I agree very much with Dr. Finnigan that have people look and critically assess your own manuscript. Become a peer reviewer at other journals, and then apply that skills to your own manuscript. And you'll start to see things in a different light. But most of all, write, polish, and submit.
Thank you so much. I have some housekeeping notes here. So since beginning of 2019, Dr. Glass and I took 33 book projects, and we selected only 15 of them. So all 15 published by now, at least, they are in the publication pipeline. And also we have 8 professional journals in the network, and Dr. Raby and many other colleagues have been with us for many years. Thank you. And these are the open access journals, and all the book projects that we selected were affiliated with the Routledge, Springer, or Palgrave Macmillan. All publishing house have pretty much the same standard timeline, including Sage Open, any other journals that we took. These journals actually do not have any author publication fees. Some of them are on Scopus, some of them are in the process. It's a long process, in fact. And these are some of the open access book or semi-open access. We do have 3 open access book in process for this year. Then we always partner with the open access publication with another university or traditional publishing house. Then also we do have call for essays, October 30th, the deadlines. We accept the 3 categories of essays from the student and faculty member on their cross-cultural experience in English, Hindi, Arabic, Chinese, Russian, German, or Hindi. I think I said that, in Spanish. This year, the first volume is coming out in a couple of months, and these are our institution who sponsored the project. So they are in 3 categories for the international student experience, American student experience overseas, or faculty or staff cross-cultural experience, including Fulbright program or other similar research collaboration overseas. Also, we do have a Millennium Scholar program. It's a mentor-mentee program. Probably 37 scholars are taken each year into the program, all recommended or nominated by their deans or department chairs. Regarding the other upcoming events, we have on March 22nd, April 5th, 20th, 18th, and June 15th. These are the spring schedule that we have with us. I know we are almost top of the hours, but if we have any of you have a burning question, we can take 1 or maybe 2 before we go.
I have a couple of questions, and I'm just going to randomly select. One is a good question. An abstract, will it make or break a submission? Is this an accurate statement?
I don't know if it will make or break, but if the abstract doesn't tell the story of the article, there's a disconnect. And whenever there's a disconnect, there's going to be a problem.
Thank you, Dr. Raby. This is a great question. I noticed that most of the research and journals focus on US. Will your journal be interested in any research from Australian, Chinese, international student study?
We don't restrict to the US in terms of the content, but I would say that if it's something that there's alignment more broadly, whether it's in the US or other places. And so in terms of, general kinds of readership and relevance, that can be really useful. So thinking about, as you're talking about the rationale for this work, if there are ways to connect with the broader work, especially if there's a whole body of literature in the US that might be important that people would know about as they're reviewing it, I would think about those kinds of things versus whether it's appropriate or not. It is appropriate. It's just you want to make those larger connections.
And I would say in my journal, since the focus is on comparative and international higher education, that yes, the focus can be on any country, combination of countries, and it does not have to align with anything with the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And also we have journal with the name itself, Journal of International Student. So that could be another venues. Although, we receive more than 500 manuscripts and we take roughly 100, but the chances, they can go to one of these journals within the OJED platform if you consider those venues. Also,
Thank you so much.
all right. So thank you so much. We are on the top of our hour. We appreciate each and everyone for taking time to speak with us, listen with us. Hopefully, this session is helpful for your personal, professional career. We look forward to hearing from each of you. Reach out to us if you need any information. We will follow up with you. The copy of recorded session and the information of all of our journals and open access book as well. So give us a week or so. We'll get back to you. Thank you very much. Have a good day and good night here in the US.
Thank you. Thank you so much.